All right, we are here with Kelly Swanson today, our May Chamber speaker, and she is a motivational speaker, a comedian, a quadruple threat is what we are calling her.
I'll take it. Never been called a quadruple threat before.
Doesn't have the same alliteration
No.
as the triple threat, but we'll take it.
Yeah.
We're so excited to have you here today.
I'm glad to be here. Hey, everybody.
Yeah. So Kelly is a storyteller. So tell us about that. Tell us why storytelling is important in the business world.
That's a good question. A lot of people ask me that question when they're like, why do we need a storyteller to come in and talk to us? Well, when people ask me why stories matter in business, the first thing I usually say is, well, how important is it for you in your business to influence somebody else? You know, how is it, are you trying, right? Most of us would go, yeah, we all need to do that. How important is it to get somebody to, I hate to put it this way, but do what you want them to do? And I learned quickly that telling people what to do is not the same as making them want to do it. Mm-hmm. So it really starts with, who are you trying to influence and persuade? And do you understand that data and information and telling them what to do isn't where the power is? It's in story. And story gives you, and I'm really condensing it, there's a lot about story, but story is one of the best tools you have to persuade your market. Did y'all hear that?
So what makes a good storyteller? What are 2 or 3 things that make somebody a great storyteller versus because we've all heard stories that
just go all over the place and they ramble all over the place. Well, and one thing I do like to say is that we all tell stories naturally. Mm-hmm. And then when we try to do it on purpose on a stage like I do or in business, we forget, everything we do naturally and turn into somebody else. So you have a lot of those skills already. But you're right. Some stories ramble all over the place. They never get anywhere. Every story my mother tells starts with what she had for breakfast. I'm like, please. But remember that I'm not, for the sake of our conversation today, I'm not talking about storytelling for fiction or for novels or for just pure entertainment, which there's a place for that. I'm talking about it as a tool to persuade somebody. So to me, it's not about the best story. Everybody's like, is this the best story? Is this the best? I'm like, y'all are asking the wrong question. Find the right story that does what you need it to do. Does it mimic or mirror your buyers? Let's just call them a buyer, whoever's listening to the story. Does it mirror their pains and desires? Are they going to relate to the character in your story and what's going on with them? So a good story is really about finding the right story that illustrates the point you want to make and does the work. And you wouldn't believe how many stories, when you get to the end of them, I'm like, what's the point?
Yeah.
And I know it sounds like duh, but a lot of people, when you say, what's the point of that story? Like, not really sure. So that's a good question to ask when you're putting together stories in business is, what's the point? Why am I telling this? What do you want somebody to think, feel, or do as a result of hearing that story?
Yeah.
And you already have far more control over it going in because you already know where it needs to end up.
Yeah.
That makes sense?
Yeah.
Well, you know that. This is kind of your thing.
Sure, yeah. Do you find that you shift your story depending on your audience? Or does it kind of stay pretty similar?
I might shift it, but I use a lot of stories.
Yeah.
And so I will choose a different story if I'm talking to a group of single moms than I would speaking to dairy farmers in Amish country. I would choose different stories. I would also add, without going too deep into it, we connect through stories. We connect, it's the human experience.
We connect emotionally.
Yes, we do, and that's critical.
Yeah.
And the reason we connect in stories, I always say it's not plot that we connect to, it's emotion. So when you share your story, you and I obviously are not the same age. We may have had different life experiences. Our stories aren't the same, and I can't relate to your story. We all walk a different path. But when you start naming the emotions, how you felt isolated, you felt scared, you moved to a new country and you felt alone. We only have a certain set of emotions.
Yeah.
And when I hear that emotion, you see, then my brain, and there's a science behind this that I won't go into today, but the brain automatically searches for that emotion and finds a time in my own life when I went through that.
Oh.
So I'm standing in my story and yours at the same time. And I'm really condensing it. There's been a lot of research on this at Harvard and Psychology Today. So don't trust me. The research
trust
backs
Harvard.
it up. Yes, trust them. They know more than I do.
I mean, that's such a good point, because if you, in any sort of business transaction, if you don't feel emotionally connected to that person, you don't feel like you have to work with them. You might be on the hunt to look for somebody else to use.
Right. I always say we're all in the business of selling.
Yeah.
And you don't like to hear that if you're really not.
Nobody
or
likes
you're an
sales.
artist. Or, nobody likes that.
Yeah.
Well, and I like to say serving, because that's a better word for me. I don't like to think of selling. I don't know how to do that either. I like to think of serving.
Yeah.
But and I learned as a motivational speaker, getting on a stage, I can either get up, and I'm hired to go into a room full of strangers, get them all excited about their jobs again, and I got 20 minutes, and I've never met them, and they've all just heard they might not get a bonus. I mean, whatever it may be.
Yeah.
And you know, and they're all looking at me with their arms crossed, and I've got to get to that point. See, now I forgot what the question was. I do that. Oh God, it was such a good point though that I was going to make.
We were talking about how if you're not emotionally connected to that person,
Oh.
you're going to move on to somebody else.
I remember. Thank you. I knew I would get somewhere back. I told you you'd have to rein me in. I do tend to ramble. No judging. But here's the thing. We're all in a position. Oh, so I learned as a motivational speaker, I had to sell this to that audience.
Pretty quickly, too.
Pretty
I would
quickly.
imagine.
You have to sell to your customer when they walk in. If you're in sales, obviously. If you're a new leader, you got to sell that vision to those people, or that change that's around the corner, or bring everybody through a really tough time and motivate and inspire them. That makes us all salespeople. Well, I didn't know how to sell, so I started asking them, what do you do? And the cardinal rule, y'all all know this already, I'm just reminding you, is that people buy from people they like, trust, believe, and feel like they know. People they like, trust. I mean, think about those words. Like you, trust you, believe you, feel like I know you. That has nothing to do with what you sell, your features or benefits. It has to do with what I think about you personally. And there's where story shows us who you are without you having to tell us who you are.
Yeah.
I mean, it's very powerful. It's why when I go visit a new city, and I go look for a place to eat, because that's the first place I'm going to look up. And I get on like whatever TripAdvisor, I'll spend a minute on the restaurant, where it is, how much everything is, you know, how many stars it gets, whatever. And where do I go? The reviews.
Yep.
We believe what other people say about you more than what you say about you. And what are reviews? They're just stories of people's experiences, because that's what story is. It's not a list of facts. Sorry, I'm rambling, but let me say one more thing.
No.
It's not a list of facts. And you know this, being in the magazine world.
Yeah.
People say, well, I want to tell my business story. And they'll go, well, we started in 1920 with a candle and in the garage.
And we have
with
great
Earl.
customer service.
Yeah, I'm like, well, that's important information.
Yeah.
But that's not a story. The story is about a human experience. It has a beginning, a middle, and end. Somebody goes through it. It has, and I'm not dumbing it down, but I'm condensing it for the sake of our conversation, because I do believe there are pieces in that story that strategically need to be there in order for it to have that persuasive impact that you know.
So if you're a business owner and you're just like, oh my gosh, I don't have a story. Which I have a story, but how would you tell somebody who's starting from scratch, who just doesn't even know where to begin?
Right. I hope y'all are going to give them my link.
Sure.
To my free gift. I have and it's no catch. It's a online portal, kellysfreegift.com. And my book is in there. There's a training video in there. So there's all the content you could want to go there. But if you're just starting out fresh and you don't know where to go or where to turn, the first thing you need to do is understand the tool. That's why I'm even mentioning the content. Can't use a tool if you don't really understand it. The more you understand it, the easier it will be to find stories. The best I think there are two stories we should all have, not to tell you what to do. But I think everybody should have their own personal why story. Why you do the work that you do. Why it means so much to you.
Absolutely.
To be here, not what your company does, but you. And when you share those as a team, they really bring a team stronger together, and especially when you're in different locations, it'll help you see those people in accounting as people, and it really can make your team more cohesive. But in terms of really using story for persuasion, the best kind of story you could have is a customer testimonial story. Sorry, we're laughing because something just fell. They might cut that out. Who knows? But anyway, the best thing is the customer testimonial story.
Yeah, that's true.
And we get customer testimonials, but we could be better if you understand what to ask them for so that you can put it in a story format. And what I love is when you can take the story of that person you helped or somebody in your company that you all kind of take ownership of, and you tell us about what that person went through using the pieces that should be in there, conflict and a resolution and all that stuff. But if you weave yourself into it too, and you weave the company's story into it, I call that the story formula, the trifecta. I never know how to say that word, but it's, I think every story is about me, it, and you. Does that make sense?
Yeah, you have to pull that other person in to keep them interested, keep them engaged. Yeah, I think the customer testimonial part is key. And the key to that is you have to ask for those. People are not going to be like, oh, hey, excuse me, I have a testimonial.
Right. And I think you have to feed them. You almost have to say, what pain were you having? What was this? You have to feed them, or they're just going to gush and go, he was great. Yet if you want, when you get a story, and that customer is, you've pulled out the pieces, now your buyer, that is, it's going to be more persuasive without going too deep into it. A lot of times I'll get companies say, come help us write our company story, and we will sit there all day long and never get anywhere because they're trying to come up with this one story that'll be the best on the front page, and we often never get anywhere because they're not clear, and it's in my book, it walks you through it, on who their buyer is. If you don't know who your persuasion, it's a two-way street. I got to know what drives you and what motivates you. And so understand, so we get on this hamster wheel and never get anywhere. And then I finally say, let's put that task to the side. Let's just write a bunch of stories about the people you've helped. Write your customers' stories. Who says you have to have this one slick, fancy, our story video? Tell all of them. Have a portfolio of your customer stories. It will be just as, and splash them all over social media. People still aren't using storytelling. It's so powerful and it's free.
I totally agree with that. And your story, might change. You're going to have new stories come in throughout the years.
Right.
So a lot of our chamber members are small business owners. And I think that's good in this case because they do have those passionate stories as to why they started their business, why they love what they do. Not that people in the corporate world don't have that, but I think our chamber members really, really have a lot of drive and a lot of passion and a lot of good stories. So to help them know how to tell those stories is awesome.
I can tell you what some of them are thinking right now because I hear it all the time. They're thinking, but I don't want to brag. How can I tell my story without bragging about it? I get that question all the time. And my answer to it is, we don't want you to brag either. So don't tell your story, tell theirs. Always, and by theirs I mean the customers, the people you serve, or your employees or your team. Always tell their story and weave yourself into it. Another way to look at it is try not to be, you hear people say, I can't tell a story that's all about me. I was told not to make myself the hero of the story. That's another thing a lot of people say is, I don't want to make myself the hero. And I think hero can have two definitions. There can be the hero who's the main character, the hero's journey, the person that we follow because this story is what you went through. And that's okay. We like those kind of stories. I mean, they can often be stories about things you did wrong or vulnerabilities. Then there's the hero like Batman. And, I saved everything. I came in and I saved the day. And because I did this, and because that's the kind of story that's going to turn people off. So I always say, don't be Batman. But you most definitely can be the main character.
Even make the customer the hero.
Yes. Or your solution. You don't have to be the hero, but your product could be, or this principle that you've learned at your company. You make that the hero. It's just a kind of a subtle way of taking that attention off yourself. And then your part in it is how honored you were to
be a part of that process.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. I can totally relate to that. And I'm sure that our chamber members can as well, because when you do have those success stories from your customers, it's the best feeling.
It is.
To be able to share those stories is a no-brainer. Share them, like you said, share them on social media. It can be as fancy or as not. It doesn't have to be, an elaborate, professional video.
In fact, the fancier and the more polished and the more commercial it looks, the bigger the risk you run, I think, of not connecting.
Yeah.
I tell people, it's not your perfection people connect to, it's your imperfection. We want real, we want authentic, and the more, that's why they say I was doing YouTube videos, and my YouTube guy said, take out all these fancy thumbnails you have and he put the picture of me with my mouth hanging half open. He goes, it's real. You're mid conversation. It's more authentic.
Oh.
So don't be afraid to just speak your heart. But there needs to be structure to it.
Yeah.
You speaking passionately about what you do. There is still a method. There is still a structure you need to that story that makes it strategic. That's why I always say this is strategic storytelling. According to one of these scientists in the research, they said stories give you the ability to actually plant ideas into people's minds. It's that powerful.
Wow.
So, use it for good.
Well, and I think the other key is probably to practice it. Yeah. Practice telling those stories over and over and over, because, the more you practice it, the more concise
and you don't have to be a motivational speaker and memorize it and get up there and do, you can read it. I mean, we don't, you know what I'm saying? I mean, we don't, it's fine.
Yeah.
It's fine. Don't overthink it to the point that you're scared to do it. And I get it. It's, I spent 30 minutes out in the car just trying to do a little demo video promo for a client saying I'm coming their way. And, no, this looks bad. No, let me do it from this angle. And, no, they better not be able to see my thighs. I'm spending more time worrying you're going to see my thighs than anything else.
We're
as
our
long
own
as you
worst
see my
critics.
shoes.
I was going to say, show us those shoes.
His thighs when you have shoes like this. I'm not going to wear. I got flip-flops right over there. As soon as I get out of here, the flip-flops.
I love it.
But anyway, I had to have some reason to get dressed up today. Hadn't been out in a while.
I hear you. Yeah, I don't get dressed up. It's workout clothes for me 9 times out of 10. So.
Yeah, me too. I got yoga pants, like 47 pairs of yoga pants, and I always say I wear them everywhere except yoga.
That's funny. Well, any last thoughts for our last couple minutes for people to take away from Kelly Swanson?
Don't eat yellow snow. No, I don't know. You caught me off guard. What advice? Last thoughts. People always they say that listening to me is like a fire hose, and that I need a translator because there's so much about story, and I get so excited, and it's not it's easy, but it's not. It's not a Band-Aid type of thing. It's something you study and you learn and you make it part of your training and your organization. And you, so the first thing I want to say is just study the tool. Just go learn about it. Just make it part of everything. It is so key to persuade. It is the difference in being heard in a crowded market. It's noisy, it's loud out there, and it's not the one shouting the loudest who's going to get all the attention. It's not the one who can be heard above the noise. It's the one who can be trusted in it. And stories get shared, they get watched. I watch sometimes stories and don't even turn the sound on, and they're the most I don't know. They're the thing that's going to get shared the most. That's the way to get in. When people get really overwhelmed, when they start going into the content, and they're like, I just don't even know what to do next. And I always say, well, think about the next time you have a touch point with your employees. Maybe it's a meeting. Maybe it's a Zoom call. I'm just saying. An opportunity to be face to face. And think about how you're trying to influence them. What do you want to make them think or feel? And just think to yourself, could I use a story here that would illustrate my point? Just do that. Just get used to. Or I have a friend on the West Coast who started one of the largest women's groups out there. Forget what they call these groups. But anyway, and so everybody's going to her asking how her attendance is so high. These people keep coming back. How she's built such a flourishing networking group. And she said, the best tip I can give you is every time you bring those people together, have them share their stories. Even if it's one or two of them, any way you can incorporate more people into that process of sharing about themselves, they'll feel valued, they feel heard, they want to come back. She said, but they also connect to the other people in the room, and you're creating this bonding experience. There is something, it's simply stepping into somebody's story for just a moment, and it's hard to judge them, be angry at them. You just understand them, and you create an experience. So just, even if you can just get other people to share stories. Can I tell you one other thing this guy told me? I was given two examples. They're both with DJs. I was speaking to a group of DJs. And by the way, they don't just play music. They do a lot more than that.
Yeah.
I was blown away. They're like party planner, event planners. They're amazing. So I was teaching my workshop, and one of the guys was sitting there. You could tell he wasn't sure he was buying this. And so I just didn't focus on him and focused on the others. He sent me a letter a couple weeks later. And he said he was sick that day, so don't assume. And he said he was so out of it. He said, I didn't feel good. And he goes, and I was a little skeptical that this story stuff, that I should spend my time on it. He said, but I decided, all right, what could it hurt? And he said he had a trade show coming up, and he wasn't going to go because he'd stopped going to them. Because he said, I don't get many leads. You spend all that time and money to be there, and I just didn't think it was worth my time. He said, but I thought I'm going to try what she said, and I'm going to try incorporating story. He said, so I did what you said and wrote a story about this one wedding and how it turned out and how it made him feel and all this stuff. And he said he stood there at his vendor table as they were coming at this bridal show, whatever it's called. And he said it was hard, because it's hard at a vendor table, to incorporate story.
Yeah.
He said, but I was just winging it. And he goes, and he goes, you didn't have a lot of time, and they're passing through. He said, I had brides crying, their moms crying, even a couple of dads crying. He said,
God.
He said, I went home with 27 business cards of people who wanted to meet up with me for a consultation. He goes, it works. And that's not about Kelly. That's about the power of story to make an instant connection. A different group of DJs, I did a 2-day workshop, and at the end of the first day, they all went home, and they came back the next day, and one of them said, I've got to share what happened last night. And we said, what? And he had a consultation that night after the workshop. He said, I didn't know what to do. I didn't have a story, but I decided not to jump into the sales conversation in the way I normally do, which would be, okay, here's what we do. What do you want your wedding to be like? He said, I just stopped and said, well, so tell me how y'all met. And he said, so the couple, I don't think he realized what he was doing, how powerful a connection he was making without saying a word.
Yeah.
And just asking a couple to talk about how they met, you talk about really doing something smart in the sales process. And then he said, is there anything about me you'd like to know? And I thought, well, that's an interesting question. I've never asked that.
No.
And the guy said, well, what do you like to do in your spare time? And he said, I like fishing. He said, when I'm not working, and the guy goes, I like fishing. And, and they're all, you see, it's quite simple in its, networking 101, human connection. And at the end of the time of the consultation, the guy leaned across, he goes, I knew from the minute we sat down that you were the one we were going to go with, and we all just laughed. I mean, that's what you're doing.
That's awesome.
And look, he made it about himself, about them, and about his service. Mm-hmm. He brought all three of them together. And I think he said he talked to them about one wedding he did. Yeah. Like the one they wanted. So he merged all three.
Yeah, bringing in his service was the last thing that he did. Yes. Which is smart.
Yes.
You get to know him. Yeah, that's a great story. Well, I love that you ended this with 2 amazing stories. You are an amazing storyteller.
Oh, well, thank you. You ought to hear me tell them when I'm really working on the stories. But that's more the entertainment also side of what I do. So
tell us your website. How we can get your free gift.
Okay. The free gift, now, there are many roads to find me. If you Google Kelly Swanson, motivational speaker, you will find me.
Okay.
My website is very long, motivational speaker, kellyswanson.com, but just Google it. The free gift is on Kelly's, no apostrophe, freegift.com. But if you go to my website, there's also a tab that says free gift. I know it's redundant. It should probably just say gift. Maybe I'll change it. Click on that and you're on your way. But there's a favor I have to ask. I've started it won't cost you any money. I've started a new online story series that I've always wanted to do. And it wasn't until 2020 that I finally went, you know what? Life is short. I'm going to really be the artist I want to be and not just always be about what my business needs to look like. So I started a new story series set in my town of Pride's Hollow, based on the concept of this old man in town dying and leaving all his money to the people in town as long as they followed his last request, which is to do something brave. And every vignette is a story of what the people in town do to be brave. They're really stories about finding joy in your own front yard, having the courage to change the way you see your world. But anyway, that's on my YouTube channel, and it's Pride's Hollow, like pride, like don't be prideful, prideshollow.com. It'll just redirect you to and I need subscribers, so get your cousin and your granny and anybody else to subscribe. It doesn't cost you anything, and on the homepage we've got 5 episodes up so far.
Awesome. Well, I'll go check that out.
I'm so excited.
It was a pleasure to chat with you.
Same here.
Thank you so much.
Same here. And I'll be joining y'all for Q&A.
Yes.
Ooh, so you can ask me any more specific questions. They're probably like, shut her up already.
No.
Just saying.
Thanks, Kelly.
You're welcome.
All right, that's a wrap.